Merry Christmas. Thank you, and thank you for spending some of your Christmas preparation time with us. I can assure you, you will feel very good about having done that when this concert moves into its music portion. Our theme is Holiday in the Movies, Hollywood in the movies. They've long given us a great backdrop for the holidays, and a critical part of those films is the music. And if you're like many of us, you're probably humming some right now and even singing some as you recall them and get ready for the big holiday next week. Today, we will be accompanying you as you sing the songs, and feel free to sing them, but maybe to yourselves as you hear the orchestra. To enhance the experience, we've asked a noted Detroit media author, educator, producer, and film fan, Kevin Walsh, to join us. Now, Kevin, among other things, is president of the nonprofit Digital Arts Film and Television, which sponsors the 48th Michigan Student Film Festival at the Detroit Institute of Arts. He's the Humanities and Science Chair at the University of Phoenix Detroit campus. He's a producer of the television documentary series, Digging Detroit. He's also a tremendous film buff. He will provide background on the movies, and we will feature the orchestra playing the music. And along with the background, he'll play a few clips from the movies just to refresh your memory. During the intermission, I should say, even before the intermission or after, we will round out the afternoon with some music from Broadway hits that have had Christmas music in them. And if you listen carefully, we'll even sneak in a little Nutcracker Suite as well. During intermission, we invite you to stop by the orchestra table in the lobby, where you're going to find some beautiful hand-drawn Christmas cards for sale. They're perfect for those special people on your Christmas list, and they're going at a very great bargain price right now. Also, when you're there, consider signing our guest book. And include your email address, because that way we'll be able to tell you about future concerts, future events, future items that the orchestra is involved in. Now, before we get into the music, my usual reminder. Please turn off or turn to silent notification any cell phones, pagers, or other signaling devices you may have with you. It's just embarrassing when you're playing that in the midst of some other music that's coming from here. Now, it's time for great music in the orchestra. Please join me in welcoming film expert Kevin Walsh and the MSO, Director of Music, and the conductor, Thomas Cook. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Merry Christmas. Welcome to two of the Macomb Symphony Orchestra's Holiday at the Movies. I'm Kevin Walsh, and I'm honored to be back as we take a look and a listen to some classic holiday and Hollywood music. The 7 films we'll be examining aren't necessarily Christmas movies. In fact, one has nothing to do with Christmas at all, except that it borrowed the score from the Nutcracker to provide a soundtrack for dancing mushrooms, flowers, and fairies. I'm sure you can't figure that one out. But each film's music is added to the environment of the holiday season, and you're going to see certain themes come forward throughout the afternoon. All these themes are not unlike the original Christmas story, which resulted in great endings from a humble beginning in a manger, since there was no room at the inn. So, we're going to get started with our first one. One Trivial Pursuit question has read from the original edition back in '83, and it tripped me up. What is the name of the Bing Crosby film that premiered the song White Christmas? And immediately, you say Holiday, and I did not. I said White Christmas, of course. The Danny Kaye movie in 1954 with Bing Crosby. 12 years earlier, the Crosby-Fred Astaire film Holiday Inn was where it all began, about Crosby's character. New York entertainer Jim Hardy, who got a little tired of the routine in New York, and he planned to marry one of his partners and settle down in retirement at a nice farm in Connecticut. But unfortunately, he was jilted. She decided to stay with Fred Astaire, and he decided to give farming a try. But it didn't go out well after a year, so he went back to Manhattan and pitched his idea to try to have a little inn where there's shows just on national holidays. The hotel chain, if you're wondering, took its name from this movie, and that was in the 50s, so I always thought it was the other way around, but that was before I was around much. The scene you're about to see sets up the song White Christmas as Jim and Linda meet for the second time, this time not under false pretenses like they did the night before. Jim was pretending he was a big club owner, Linda was pretending she's a big entertainer celebrity, and neither was the case. A white Christmas has become such a common phrase that it's hard to imagine that it didn't exist before Irving Berlin thought of it. Some stories have him thinking of it in California and others in Arizona. But you will hear probably 10 weather reports by the end of the week yearning for a white Christmas. Perhaps today's weather would be better for Easter parade. But maybe even go for a bike ride on a white Christmas, we'll see. Crosby actually sang this song before the movie came out on Christmas Day 1941, but it was nearly a year later that the song really took off, and it still stands after some debate as the biggest hit ever. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most successful single of all time. Crosby's version alone had 150 million copies sold, and over 100 artists have sung it, from Perry Como, the Drifters, and Elvis, to Kelly Clarkson and Keith Urban just last year. The song became an anthem for the troops overseas for the remaining 3 years of the war and continues to be synonymous with Bing Crosby. Not bad for a song that Crosby described to Berlin as, "I don't think we have any problems with that one, Irving." So we're going to take a look at 1942's Holiday Inn, and then you're going to hear from the orchestra. Could almost feel it snowing, right? Trying to make the best of a rough situation seems to be a common theme in most holiday favorites, from Bob Cratchit to Cindy Lou Who. And often a song can long outlive its film. Just ask the producers of A Summer's Place. Patrick Dennis's 1955 novel, Auntie Mame, An Irreverent Escapade, is based on his zany aunt who had everything, then lost it all in the Great Depression, but never let that affect her attitude. It's one of the best-selling American books of the 20th century, and 3 years after its release, Rosalind Russell made Mame Dennis a household name with the 6-time Oscar-nominated Auntie Mame, with great lines like, "Life is a banquet and most poor suckers are starving to death." The novel had another word for suckers, but in film in 1950s, you did that. In 1966, Angela Lansbury took home a Tony Award for the Broadway musical adaptation Mame, which ran for nearly 4 years. 8 years after that, the show was then adapted into a movie featuring Lucille Ball. The story behind We Need a Little Christmas began when composer Jerry Herman of Hello Dolly fame noted that during the Depression and World War II, when he was growing up, Christmas holidays meant a lot, and it really boosted everybody's spirits. So, as Mame loses her fortune in the crash, she decides to move the holiday forward to the week after Thanksgiving, shocking her servants and everyone around her. Perhaps we have Mame to blame for Christmas creep that has moved the shopping season forward to the day after the 4th of July, apparently. Unfortunately, the audience and critics did not love Lucy in this version, which became her final big screen appearance. To this day, no one at Warner Brothers can explain why Lansbury was passed over, despite her Tony for the role and 3 other Oscar nominations. Because Lucy's voice wasn't strong enough, the sound engineers had to piece together as many as 16 different takes to make this song you're about to see. After a lifetime of smoking, Lucy just joked and said, "Mame stayed up all night drinking champagne. What do you expect her to sound like, Julie Andrews?" I think the years have been nicer to Mame, and obviously Lucille Ball's a legend, and you got to give her credit for trying this role. If you turn to one of Detroit's 2 round-the-clock Christmas stations on the way home, you're probably going to hear this song in the spirit of Auntie Mame from the film Mame, We Need a Little Christmas. Babes in Toyland is an operetta quickly Quickly, composed by Victor Herbert after the Broadway success in 1903 of The Wizard of Oz on stage. But the two most recognized songs in this strange mix of Mother Goose and Santa Claus are March of the Toys and the song we'll be hearing shortly from our orchestra, Toyland. I can kind of see everybody out there. Those of you who grew up watching Babes in Toyland, or it was later called the March of the Wooden Soldiers, raise your hand if you watched it on holidays. Got a few folks out there. By the time the classic 1934 film version of the operetta appeared, very little remained of the original book, and only 5 of Herbert's songs made the cut. In the odd opening sequence that you're going to see, you will see a neighborhood that could be around the block from Munchkinland. In addition to Little Bo Peep and various other fairy tale characters, Little Rascals producer Hal Roach also borrowed Disney's Three Little Pigs and their theme song, along with a capuchin monkey that they dressed up like Mickey Mouse, without permission. Fortunately for Roach, Walt was his friend and didn't sue, a bit different than the legal department that now inhabits Orlando. Babes in Toyland later re-released The March of the Wooden Soldiers, lost money at the box office, but achieved its real fame on television. Every Thanksgiving and Christmas, children in the 1950s, 60s, and even into the 70s counted on its appearance. And in New York, WPIX still shows it on Thanksgiving and Christmas. You'll hear a little bit of Toyland in the following clip, but you'll also get a look behind the scenes as Santa Claus and with the troubles he has with subcontractors, namely Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. Here's 1934's Babes in Toyland. Tchaikovsky's ballet, The Nutcracker, also wasn't much of a success when it first came out. 70 years later, it is now the main revenue generator for every level of ballet company in the world, perhaps due to Walt Disney's decision to include the Nutcracker Suite, a collection of songs from the ballet, in Fantasia, his third feature-length motion picture following Snow White and then Pinocchio. Fantasia was intended to be an ongoing Disney film project every 2 years, with different classical scores added to it. But the war intervened, and Fantasia wasn't picked up again until 2000. Unlike Babes in Toyland, which isn't too much about Christmas, The Nutcracker and the short story it's based on, The Nutcracker and the Mouse King, the German story written in 1816, is all about Christmas. But The Nutcracker was never made into a film until Disney featured its scores with the flora and fauna that you're about to see in a film like Babes in Toyland that wasn't a hit until multiple re-releases. Now, adjusting for inflation, Fantasia is reckoned to be the 22nd highest grossing film of all time. So you're going to please enjoy these scenes from Fantasia, followed by the Symphony Orchestra's 4 songs from the Nutcracker, and then we'll have intermission, and I'll see you after that as we get ready for a visit to Bedford Falls.
I'm a teacher. Let me tell you what I make. I make learning a privilege, not a chore, and frustration a tool, not an obstacle. I make working hard seem easy and giving up impossible. I make an old subject feel like a fresh thought and unconventional methods common. I'm a teacher. I make more.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund breeding.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
Welcome back. Give that nice round of applause. I hate to say this next sentence, but like the disappointment Tchaikovsky felt with this reception of his ballet, The Nutcracker, Frank Capra's first post-war film following his Oscar-winning series Why We Fight didn't come close to breaking even when the movie was first released. It didn't even crack the top 10. But to Frank Capra's amazement, 40 years later, due to elapsed copyright, It's a Wonderful Life has become one of the most beloved films of all time. If you remember in the early 80s when the copyright expired, it was on pretty much every channel all the time. It's based on the short story The Greatest Gift, a publishing failure. The author actually ended up sending it out as a Christmas card when he couldn't get it published, and that's where RKO picked it up. Frank Capra saw the potential that no one else did. Originally, it was seen as a vehicle for Cary Grant, and he saw what Jimmy Stewart needed to see, and he saw Jimmy Stewart, who had just come back from serving in World War II, a role that pretty much spoke to Jimmy Stewart's character at that time. The snowy eastern town of Bedford Falls was filmed in the heat of late spring and early summer in Los Angeles. Out of the 5 Oscar nominations this film that no one saw that year received, the only win went to the guy who invented the fake snow. Everybody was very excited they weren't stepping on cornflakes. The film's composer, Dmitri Tiomkin, wasn't happy that much of his score wasn't used. Even the theme from It's a Wonderful Life was dropped from the opening credits in favor of the 1844 minstrel hit, Buffalo Gals, with a nostalgic feeling that critics at the time ridiculed as, you know the term? Capra corn. We're about to see a collection of key scenes from It's a Wonderful Life, including the pivotal drugstore scene with Mr. Gower, where Tiomkin's score was completely eliminated. And you can decide if it was right, if Capra made the right decision in that sequence to not have music. Then you'll hear Tiomkin's haunting style on the bridge, a distinctive sound that works so well in such films of his as High Noon, The Guns of Navarone, and Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Dmitri Tiomkin never forgave Capra for what he called an all-around scissors job to his score. But I'm sure you'll agree that the balance of a masterful filmmaker and a brilliant composer can produce amazing results. Tiomkin did get a little shout out this last year at last year's Winter Olympics in Russia. They paid tribute to their famous son and used theme from It's a Wonderful Life in its closing ceremonies. From 1946, some scenes with music, some scenes without. Here's a look at my favorite movie, It's a Wonderful Life. Somebody asked me what makes a movie your favorite movie, and I think it's probably the fact that every time I've seen that scene in the drugstore, I get all choked up still. And it's only been 145 times I've seen it. Capra was asked about that movie in the 80s when it suddenly was really hitting its peak, and he said, I don't feel like I'm associated with that movie other than, it's like having a son, and then you don't see the kid for 40 years, and then you find out he's president of the United States. So, similar. There are plenty of scenes in the films we've examined so far that have nothing to do with Christmas. But the next film doesn't just have no Christmas scene, it has no Christmas song. But in Home Depot the other day in the paint department, sure enough, I heard Richard Rodgers' My Favorite Things playing above my head. And pretty soon I was humming along, and buying paint was much better than usual. Just as Crosby's White Christmas was popular before the release of Holiday Inn, My Favorite Things was already a Christmas favorite even before the movie was released in 1965, having already been recorded by Jack Jones and Eddie Fisher following the success of the stage version in 1958 with Mary Martin as Maria. In that version, My Favorite Things comes a little bit earlier. It's in the Abbey, not in a crowded bedroom, but she's trying to talk herself into positive thoughts and getting away from dog bites and bee stings and scary, Captain Von Trapp's. But if you have a great song and it happens to mention brown paper packages tied up with string or snowflakes that stay on your nose and eyelashes, it can easily become a Christmas carol. The rainstorm and Liesel's arrival through the window sets the stage for Julie Andrews as Maria on her first night with the Von Trapp family. From 1965, The Sound of Music. Lorelei Maria tries to cheer up children in Austria, we travel back to a similar scene at the turn of the century as Tootie, another sad little girl played by the wonderful Margaret O'Brien, is upset about leaving her beloved St. Louis for Manhattan and finds comfort with someone who probably shares Julie Andrews' crown as the greatest singer in film history, Judy Garland. Hugh Martin composed the song for MGM's 1944 Meet Me in St. Louis, and it was on the set that Judy Garland met her husband, future husband, director Vincent Minnelli, Liza's father. The song has undergone many lyrical changes from Martin's original draft, and I'm sure you'll agree why Judy Garland and Minnelli stepped in and asked to have these lyrics changed because they were a little sad. Have yourself a merry little Christmas, it may be your last. Next year, we may all be living in the past. Okay. I think even the Grinch would agree that that was a little down. Frank Sinatra, 13 years later, got Martin to adjust another line, adding, "Hang a shining star upon the highest bough," which replaced, "Until then, we'll have to muddle through somehow." So the song's nothing but transformative, and although Judy Garland's character Esther isn't able to cheer up Tootie or herself, the film's release, just 3 weeks before the Battle of the Bulge, did strike an important nostalgic chord with not only the troops but also America, much like our first song, White Christmas, did. This is from 1944's Meet Me in St. Louis. Here's Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
Jingle bells.